grados en la escala de Richter, con epicentro en los límites de los estados de Puebla y Morelos, que dejó enormes daños en toda la infraestructura de la región. Cuando aún no nos reponíamos de este terremoto y con un proceso incipiente,
and while we were still catching our breath from this earthquake, 5 months later, on February 16th, 2018, at 1739, close to Pinoteca Nacional in Oaxaca State, we registered a new movement at 7.2 degrees Richter that created a lot of damages. Households, public buildings, roads, and schools were severely affected. To deal with this emergency, we assessed the damages, identifying damages in school infrastructure in Chiapas, State of Mexico, Guerrero, Hidalgo, Michoacán, Morelos, Oaxaca, Puebla, Tlaxcala, Veracruz, and Mexico City. The first efforts to assess the damages at school infrastructure lacked technical rigor, and yet they determined 19,194 damaged schools. Therefore, actions were carried out to precise that number. Now, between 2017 and 2020, over 6,000 actions have been taken to address this as part of the strategy implemented by the federal government that created the Reconstruction National Plan, whose purpose is to regain the responsibility of the state in protecting people's human rights and aid the people affected by the earthquakes. This program is in partnership with the Secretariat of Education, Health, Culture, and the National Housing Commission. Likewise, the 3 levels of government participate in this effort, thus fulfilling the commitment to support the impacted persons from the earthquakes as part of the National Development Plan from the federal government, which comprises rehabilitation and rebuilding of schools, churches, etc., that are part of the cultural heritage of our country. In order to reach this goal, on March 1st, 2020, the decree to create the Intersecretary Commission was published, including the Secretariat of Citizen Protection and Safety, Secretary of Finance, Public Education, Health, Agricultural Development, Urban Development, Culture, and the National Housing Commission. This intervention was initially regulated by guidelines referring to the reconstruction plan of 2019, yet in order to set the general criteria for the operation of this program and thus coordinate the execution of these actions to address the damages by these earthquakes, the guidelines for 2020 and 2021 was called Operation Rules of the National Reconstruction Plan, addressing the corresponding regulations. Now, talking about education, on April 4th, 2019, INIFED published the specific guidelines of this program, and it stated that education institutions were going to be aided at all levels if they were affected, if their infrastructure was affected, and that did not have enough resources to be rebuilt or refitted. This is important. In this sense, on October 18th, 2019, the guidelines of this program were modified in order to execute these rehabilitation actions directly by the educational institutions through participation committees in Articles 105 and 106 of the current education law. This program is called "This School is Ours," and I'll talk to you about this later. In 2019 and its fiscal year, rehabilitation actions were carried out in 6 areas and states and 364 public schools. The public investment was over 1 billion pesos, 767 million pesos going to public works, and 426 million pesos going to these participation committees. Now, the Reconstruction National Program comprises other financing. There are financing alternatives that cover damages, which is the case of the FONDEN, the Natural Disaster National Fund. With this, 9 states that receive the approval can deal with the actions for 762 schools, out of which 466 have already been rebuilt. In your screen, you can see the distribution that we have by state. In this slide, you can see refitted schools in Mexico City and Morelos State, thanks to this fund. Another source of financing, it relates to insurance. Now, for schools in Chiapas, Morelos, Oaxaca, and Mexico City, from the finance secretary of this sector, financing was done to cover 104 schools. 87 have been finished, and the investment will be over 1,530 million pesos, and we have 6 schools in Mexico City and 3 in Oaxaca and 8 in Chiapas, still with issues regarding social matters or political affairs. In this slide, we see another option for financing, which is the FAM, the Multiple Donation Fund. And in this, 2,639 schools were integrated with an investment of over 3 billion pesos with this financing source to benefit schools that were affected by the earthquakes that I mentioned. Another important source of financing are the different civil society associations that have participated. In the current administration, we have had the invaluable support of many foundations amounting to over 1 billion pesos in financing, covering 416 schools. 363 have been finished, and 45 are still to be defined in terms of repairs. The foundations that supported the reconstruction actions are the ones that you can see on the screen. And to not state any brands, you know them, and they have been generous in their support. Here we see some examples of schools where we have been able to intervene together with these foundations, the before and after. This is an example on Tuxtla Gutiérrez, Chiapas, the ESTIC school, Jose Antonio Torres in Ecatepec, the elementary school, Fernandez Albarrán in the state of Mexico, and many other examples. School buildings in Morelos State, elementary school, Venustiano Carranza, middle school in Juchitán, Oaxaca, and the National Reconstruction Program's actions in 2020. I would like to stress that the investment is over 9 million pesos for 5 schools, an investment that contrasted a lot to the over 280 millions that we got in 2019, because the program This School is Ours kicked in this year, in which 153 schools have been rehabilitated with funding given to these participation committees. One of these schools was in Chiapas and one other one in Puebla.
Creo que pasé muy rápidamente a aseguradora.
And I think I talked too quickly about the insurance source of financing. But let's continue. In this slide, it is important to stress the topic of employment and labor generated in 7 states. Over 29,890 new jobs have been created with this National Reconstruction Plan. In this year, we will invest 4.5 million pesos in actions in the state of Mexico, Chiapas, and Puebla, with 2 schools each. We're talking about elementary schools and CAM, a multiple attention center. Of course, all this is complemented with the important actions that will be carried out together with foundations, and a fundamental part because of the FAM fund and the actions that we will carry out with the funding from the Secretary of Finance. In this slide, we can see that despite these efforts, there are still schools that have not been rehabilitated. In the states, 372 schools are pending to receive this assistance, and I must say that these are lesser repairs. The investment is over 864 million pesos. In our institutional commitment, we will look for financing sources until we cover all impacted schools. And now let's talk about this program, The School is Ours, which entails the participation of parents, students, in the case of elementary schools after 4th year. And this program, The School is Ours, covers basic education schools, and this committee is These committees are very important because they decide what to do in the school in terms of maintenance, construction, furniture, or equipment. The participation of INIFED is focused in providing technical advice. When the school committees require it, we provide technical accompaniment, we provide technical guides, manuals, we explain the regulations, and even if they request it, we provide technical supervision in order to address the proper specifications during the process, thus guarding the quality of these actions. Through the supervision actions, INIFED has given 190 councils. It is fundamental for these committees to receive this counsel, this advice, to mitigate risk, because we must acknowledge that there have been some isolated cases, like the one in Techumbres, where they have had structural damage because of wind. These images relate to these cases that did not receive technical advice or counsel, and of course they represent a high risk because they don't cover the technical specifications. Here we see a covering with a pole in the center. Here we see a classroom in a second story over a building that is not designed to have this load. This is an atypical building that does not cover or does not fulfill the regulations. It's next to hill, and thus there can be a slide. It is important to provide technical advice in this program in order for these actions to have safety and technical knowledge to avoid risk. There are cases of success. Talking about the international presence that we have in the INIFED, we must stress the event organized by the ODCE that was carried out in Panama City. This is a space for experts where we were able to share with our 8 other countries the issues related to the pandemic and virtual education through television and internet that have been very successful in our country. Another event was the Panama Congress for Latin America and the Caribbean, in which we also participated. The purpose is to share experiences in the face of challenges faced by the educational sector, and as well as climate change, new technologies, and of course, our region looking for knowledge to be applied in the sector. Now we at INIFED also cover the certification of public and private schools. The main purpose is to certify that the school communities in the country attend schools that are safe, functional, and inclusive in regards to the technical specifications in the subject. We issue 3 types of certificates related to the level of fulfillment in these schools: essential, functional, and sustainable. What is assessed refers to documentation about the school, as well as safety elements and accessibility. . We must also stress that in the framework of the institutional cooperation agreement between UNAM and the Secretariat of Education, we had this diploma course with the participation of representatives from Panama and Ecuador, as well as specialized companies in the construction field. Talking about regulation and research, INIFED carries out the issuance of regulations and technical specifications. These are Mexican standards, technical specifications for furniture and equipment, a catalog for sustainability in construction, and manuals for technical sustainability that can be freely accessed in the website of our institute. We must also stress the topic of water fountains in these institutions, because during the 5 last school years, we have benefited over 6.6 million students nationwide. This program had an investment derived from trust donations, yet in another agreement for these public trusts, we are seeking an increase in budget in order to give continuity to this effort, which has as a purpose the provision of drinking water to our students to avoid obesity. And we have installed more than 520,000 school fountains, and still pending are 4,225 more fountains once the conditions in terms of health are the necessary ones in order to open schools again for in-person learning. Then we will install these 4,000 fountains and carry out the maintenance for 24 months according to the regulations of the program. Talking about projects by specialty, we would like to mention that we have requests coming from many institutions, the National Education System, SEP, the Education Secretariat, SEDATU Secretariat, SEDENA, the Secretariat of Culture, and insurance companies of the national heritage. And we have projects for the School is Ours program, among others. In this administration, we have done more than 840 projects for Oaxaca, Guerrero, Chiapas, Puebla, Morelos, the state of Mexico, and Mexico City, thanks to this National Reconstruction Program. Talking about special projects and new technologies, we issued the technical guide for the refitting of education physical infrastructure in Mexico, together with the UNAM Engineering Institute, which promotes new technologies and projects to carry out sustainable schools, such as rainwater collection, drinking fountains, and sun panels. Also, together with UNAM's Engineering Institute and, of course, Sergio Alcocer, we have also created projects related to energy dissipators. In Oaxaca, for example, and the action started 2 weeks ago. Instrumentation of accelerometers in school buildings to register earthquake movements is also important. The pilot school is the Ernesto P. Uchurtu Elementary School in Iztapalapa, in Mexico City. Likewise, we implemented the ADN Normative Documental Archive that provides support to the work in each school in order to keep these schools in optimal condition and to carry out evaluations because of earthquakes or other phenomena. In the following slide, we would like to show you the way we address the damage because of natural phenomena to support different states in the country. INIFED, as part of the National Civil Protection System, coordinates and participates with different states in the assessment and evaluation of damages in the field, and also with financing. This is the Fundem scheme, and INIFED participates in the damage evaluation committees and everything regarding prevention of damages to our infrastructure. In these committees, we coordinate with state and regional education authorities to implement strategies to assess damages, and local education infrastructure committees to assess damages and to supervise works and rebuilding efforts. Based on these programs and actions, the finance and management unit of our institute provides financing to local committees. These committees execute these actions, and thus we guarantee the proper management of resources. Talking about insurance, INIFED is designated as adjuster for the education sector. Together with insurance companies, we analyze damages because of natural disasters or human-made events, floodings, earthquakes, hurricanes, car crashes, fires, and even vandalism. And we ensure that the rehabilitation of these damages cover the rules and regulation, and we also carry out physical verification actions in field. All this is coordinated with the finance and management unit of our sector and the material resources area. We must also stress the National Information System at INIFED, and to feed the system from 2013 to 2020, we carried out over 150,000 surveys in basic elementary schools, most between 2013 and 2015, regarding hydraulic services and drainage systems and energy systems, accessibility systems, and access to internet. In middle and higher schools, this system has gathered data about schools that have been benefited by INIFED programs like Fonden and the National Reconstruction Program. A product of these improvements and are the geospatial part, mapping through technological tools that are friendly, like web map services. We implemented the risk map in 2018, and in 2020, the map relating to the surveys of infrastructures. Based on the information derived from other institutions like INEGI for geography and personal statistics, the Secretariat of Transportation, Coneval, and the Federal Electricity Commission, the National Information System feeds different layers. And an example of the usefulness of this information is the populational bells that allow us to comprehend the changes in our country and region. Another use of open data are these charts, which refers to the behavior of school cycles from 2008 to 2020 that covers schools and schools, teachers, and students. This database in the system was feed with criteria in order to fulfill the first stage of the School is Ours program. The FAM potentiated program is the most transcendent one for infrastructure in our country because it is founded in Article 52 of the Fiscal Coordination Law that enables states to potentiate up to 25% of the resources of this fund. In October 2015, states signed an agreement with the federal government in order to potentiate this 25% of the FAM fund for 25 years to get over 52 million pesos and cover all levels of education. The funds are transferred to Banobras, and the program is made up of three modes: the monetized one, financial interest, and resources for maintenance. In total, the investment of these three levels surpasses 52 billion pesos. In this program, we have three instances: states through their education infrastructure committees, which are the ones that are in charge of hiring and requesting these projects through Banobras, who supervise the works. Banobras is the one who provides the payments, and INIFED is in charge of the technical and regulation and administrative supervision of the programs. The program covers 8 components or assistance modes. Component 1 is structural safety. The second one is sanitary services, which is important because of the COVID pandemic. We, of course, favor projects in states that enable hygiene conditions before the eventual return of students to the schools. The resources still to be allocated amount to 16 billion pesos, out of which 12 billion are divided between resources to be hired and resources to be paid. There are over 36 billion pesos that have been allocated. 2.6 billion come from monetization and are about to be allocated. And in terms of maintenance resources, we're talking about over 995 million pesos that will provide maintenance to the constructions that was carried out in previous years. We see finished works because of this program in different states. For example, the Technological University of Puebla, the Polytechnic University of Santa Rosa, Jauregui, Querétaro are examples of this. And with this, we can conclude the information about the INIFED works and to address the earthquakes of 2017 and 2018 that impacted schools in 8 states of our country. And as we mentioned, there is still a few small examples to be refitted. So this is my presentation. I'm at your service. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor. This time we have time, quite a lot of time, to address some of the questions that our audience has. So I'm going to gather them. Most questions, it relates to
the first question has to do with the reconstruction or retrofitting work. Who should be in charge of that? So different questions have to do with what it is that you think about schools doing this job. And if you have the technical capacities and the standards to know the perspective in terms of the quality and safety of schools when the school authorities are in charge of the retrofitting or the reconstruction. Please. Yes, very glad to answer your question. The program, in effect, has been challenged, questioned in many ways. But let me talk about the kindness of the program. Resources granted go from 150,000 pesos for facilities with less than 50 students, and then they have an average of 350,000 for those who have between 350 and 500 students. So those that have over 300 will be getting over 500,000 Mexican pesos. However, you might say this is a very scarce resource, and it is in rural communities in our country, for instance, in very marginalized areas of Mexico. This is a very important support to enhance the physical conditions of the buildings, those schools, those educational facilities. And if this resource didn't exist, although it's not really that much, people would never get any investment, any resources to do the retrofitting. And this is the very kind part of the program, because we can attend to over 180,000 schools and their needs throughout the country. But let me highlight especially those highly marginalized municipalities that are getting resources that otherwise they wouldn't be getting. Now, with the traditional investment programs that we have annually, we not just 18 or 20% of those schools are cared for rehab, reconstructions, or new classrooms. Being able to give those small amounts of resources allows parents and the students, and of course the school authorities, they can determine they can decide what it is they're going to do with the money, the works they're going to be implementing, that is. So this is a very generous and very broad program, because then people can buy new equipment, they can build civic squares, they can finish building classrooms or bathrooms and things like that in their school. And they can also look into electric energy grids or networks and facilities and other pending activities like fences, doors for the school, things like that. I'm talking about marginalized areas in Mexico, as you can see. So this resource really is well received, and it works for them very well. So whenever they have to do is something related to structural design. I was telling you about that in my presentation. We know there are some flaws, some problems, because things are collapsing sometimes, and then a classroom built an atypical construction without the necessary elements for the second floor. Well, unfortunately, we've got this type of cases in spite of the good faith of the parents, because they are the ones who are implementing those programs. We do have to recognize, however, that we have to intervene, especially at the state government level, to generate securities of safety and security conditions, so that those works do not collapse or that they don't have any kind of dubitable quality. And this is something that we're looking into. But generally speaking, the program is working well, and we are sending resources for schools right now. Otherwise, those resources would never get there. So I think the resource part is very good, because they can, the labor part of all this is cost-free by the parents and the community. They work without getting any type of payment. And this is community work that they do. This is what I wanted to say about the kind aspects of the program. Yes, thank you, Doctor. And on this same topic, among the questions we have, people are asking, we understand how kind the program is, but what about the mechanisms? This is what people are asking about in terms of decisions and the structural safety of the places. So the physical safety of the classrooms, of the school, that's what people are asking about. And the other question would have to do with the responsibility of the behavior of those facilities, because decisions are being made by the parents. So do you have any comments on the mechanisms from INIFED? What is INIFED doing to ensure the technical structural quality of the facilities that are being built? Not only the structural safety, but even electric facilities or installations. Those electric energy installations might also be hazardous, right? Yes, thank you. A fundamental aspect of the operational rules for the program is permanent oversight of all the work that's being done. It has permanent supervision. And in this sense, because the universe of school facilities is so broad, thus we've been able to agree with the state governments that are doing the oversight part of all this and of all the construction works. This is something that they're already doing. And we are now signing agreements through the Civil Engineers Association of Mexico, so that through their membership and also cost-free, they can supervise construction works throughout Mexico. Not everything requires specialized technical supervision, and the amounts those schools are getting do not allow them to have that technical supervision. But in case the supervision or the oversight is necessary, this is going to be provided to them. But it's also the responsibility of the local physical infrastructure institutes of INIFED that I represent, and also the Ministry of Well-being that is in charge of the ultimate operation of the program. They are checking, they are looking into this, and they're making sure that structures are not being built that might endanger the safety of the people that are going to be using those structures. And we believe that with the measures that are now being implemented, we are following the rules of the program, and we're having the decisive participation of the authorities at the local level, but also of the civil engineers that are part of the associations. What we're seeking to accomplish here is mainly to enhance the condition of schools that are lacking so many things in Mexico. Yes, thank you, doctor. Let me now change the subject and ask you another question concerning the news. I'm not sure I'm using the right technical terms, but this has to do with the disappearance of your organization, the INIFED, in Mexico. We know that this is underway right now. Could you tell us exactly what it is that the National Institute for Education Infrastructure, INIFED by its Spanish acronym, why is it that you are about to disappear, and what it is that will you continue? How is your work of INIFED going to be substituted? Thank you, Luciano. INIFED, in effect, is now going through a process of disappearance according to the general legislation of physical education infrastructure. And this was signed October 1st, 2019. What the legislation sets forth is that INIFED will be disappearing. However, it does have the obligation of concluding all the different programs underway, as well as their corresponding actions. I can thus tell you that the most important thing for physical structure programs, this is the fund that I discussed. We are now in the last stage of placing those funds throughout Mexico. So we know there's this extinction plan for INIFED. The precise date for that to take place hasn't been defined yet. And it will depend on progress made in finishing those programs that are already underway. And the drinking fountains, for instance, in schools, that's the case in point. So INIFED will be transformed. We used to have CAPSA before, and now it's INIFED, and INIFED will now turn in the General Directorate of schools belong to us, or schools are ours. There's going to be the new program, and that's what INIFED will turn into with a new acronym. So then, that will continue. And the process of extinction of INIFED will continue. But the truth of the matter is that we still have so much to do now. In terms of the disappearance of the fund, I can tell you that it will be substituted. That is, this natural disasters national fund will be substituted with other funding or financing alternatives. We know that natural disasters will never disappear. We're always going to have earthquakes and hurricanes and typhoons and things like that. We are going to have those natural disasters. They are not about to disappear. So what will happen is that all the provisions and standards through the Mexican Congress, all the events that took place up to December 31st, 2020 will be attended to by the rules of this fund. Anything after January 1st of this year, it will be looked into by the budget given to the different sectors, even of the federal government and the state governments as well, so that they can take care of the victims and all the damage. Well, for them, this fund will continue surely at least one more year until they finish everything they're now doing, and everything will be substituted by other investment mechanisms. At any rate, the important thing is that the population will still be served and the damages will still be taken care of. That's the important thing. I'm talking about damages because of natural disasters, of course, like the ones I have mentioned. Thank you so much, Doctor. Yes, one last reflection coming from other questions that we are getting here. You spoke about technology that's being promoted now in schools and base isolators and things like that. So what is INIFED's perspective in terms of introducing new technology, not only for structural safety, but solar panels, for instance, for energy efficiency, new uses of water resources, everything to improve infrastructure. Understanding that we have heterogeneous conditions all over Mexico. We have very remote areas in Mexico, though, so these new technologies will be very difficult in those regions of Mexico. But how are you thinking of introducing these new technologies, and what are you proposing for that purpose? Thank you, Luciano. In effect, let me give you some background information. This is very important. INIFED allowed for the literacy programs. A committee was created in 1944 for pilot projects, type projects implemented throughout the country. So a lot of classrooms were created for the literacy programs. And this was emulated in other Asian and Latin American countries. This were standards designed by CAPSE that doesn't exist anymore. So we promoted the type project development. That's what we call them, type projects, because we started promoting the models for this construction of classrooms in Mexico, according to structural standards, of course, especially the load the ground could take in very specific conditions in different parts of the country. Today, however, we have to evolve. Our country is located in seismic areas, affecting especially the southeastern part of Mexico, particularly the state of Oaxaca, where they have little tremors every day. In June of last year, over 1,000 classrooms or schools were damaged because of earthquakes they have in Oaxaca. This has to do with the characteristics and design that we've been promoting. However, we have to move forward. We have to do work according to what is happening in the world and our country. Seismic base isolators, the purpose of those is to start changing those schools little by little so that they are built with safer conditions in the future to avoid seismicity problems. On the other hand, I think I forgot showing this slide of catching rainfall water. This catchment programs are something we're promoting. And the seismic isolators are something else we're promoting, just as we're promoting solar panels as well. We are seeking to modernize and to have energy savings. Water savings are also very important, to have more responsible consumption of those natural resources. This is already part of the Mexican standards, the Mexican norms that are being developed for those purposes. And naturally, the enforcement has to be compulsory. And this is very heterogeneous, as you have rightly said. There are so many needs we have in Mexico and many things that are very much linked to the available economic resources. They're never abundant, as we well know. So world decisions have to be made at the economic level, and this is something very important. However, we have the purpose, and we are more than ready to implement all these changes to contribute with a new version of the new Mexican school, thinking of new school facilities and new developments, new classrooms, and rectangular classrooms. We're now thinking of changing that to hexagonal classrooms. We are going to be presenting some alternatives later on and redimensioning of the schools themselves. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Doctor. Unfortunately, we do not have more time to ask you more questions. There are so many questions people are asking. We are sending them to you, and you may answer them directly. For now, thank you so much, Dr. Ildefonso González. Thank you for your excellent presentation, and we invite you to stay with us in the rest of this panel. Well, thank you so much, dear Luciano. I will be paying attention to the next presentations. I will be very attentive. Thank you so much, and I will be in the conclusions panel at the end of today's session. I want to thank Dr. Sergio Alcocer, everyone who participated, his team, Mr. Jorge Jimenez Alcaraz, and Delfina Gomez, Secretary of Education. Thank you so much. Well, thank you.